All right, as you guys know, the 2026 Grammy nominations are out, and the Grammys just proved again that they don't care about artists like Playboi Carti. No nominations, and not even a quiet acknowledgement for iammusic, one of the most anticipated talkable albums of the year. And at this point, it doesn't feel like a snub anymore. It feels like a blacklist, like the Recording Academy made up their mind a long time ago that Cardi doesn't belong in their world. And the crazy part is, this isn't new. Every year, the Grammys remind us how out of touch they are. They act like they represent music excellence, but half of their decisions look more like politics than recognition. And when you look at Playboi Carti's situation, it becomes clear that this is about more than just one album being ignored. This is about an entire system that refuses to understand what the new generation of artists actually represent. Cardi's impact on rap is hard to ignore. Whether you're a fan or not, his sound and approach have clearly left a mark on today's scene. His image and delivery pushed rap in a different direction, one that's less about lyrical precision and more about raw energy and atmosphere. But that same unpredictability is probably what makes the Grammys unsure of how to handle him. His music doesn't fit neatly into their usual categories, and that's part of why he ends up overlooked. One of the reasons that the Grammys don't want to acknowledge him is because Cardi is the opposite of what the Recording Academy looks for. He doesn't care about industry validation. He doesn't even try to make Grammy music. He makes whatever he wants and stays completely unapologetic. And to an old school institution like the Grammys, that's a red flag. The other reason why they chose to ignore him is that the Grammys love control. They love predictability. They love artists who play the game, who show up in suits, who make respectable records that sound polished and radio friendly. Cardi gives them none of that. He doesn't attend their events and doesn't do industry networking. To them, he's too unpredictable and too anti-establishment. And that's where the idea of him being blacklisted starts to make sense. Because when the nominations for the 2026 Grammys dropped and iammusic wasn't even mentioned, people started questioning if there's more going on behind the scenes. And also, if you actually listened to the album, it wasn't some random underground release. It was massive. The rollout was chaotic, but it dominated social media. Every snippet, every leak, every rumor became an event. But when the Grammys came around, it was complete silence, like he didn't even exist in their world. Now, to understand more why that might have happened, we have to look at a closer at how the Grammys actually work. And spoiler, it's not as fair or transparent as they want you to think. First off, voter discretion. Grammy nominations are determined by members of the Recording Academy. These are producers, engineers, songwriters, and executives who get to vote based on what they think deserves recognition. And that's where the problem starts. The people voting often come from a totally different generation, one that doesn't understand the current sound or culture of rap. Next thing is Cardi's music itself. With its distorted production, aggressive delivery, and aggressive chaos, it doesn't match what these voters consider quality. They're used to clean mixing, traditional song structures, lyrical storytelling, stuff that fits their old standards of what real music sounds like. To them, Cardi's sound might feel raw or unfinished. That's why social media often calls the Grammys an old boys club. And that's not just a meme, it's kind of true. The voting pool is filled with people who are still stuck in the past, who think innovation equals noise. So when someone like Cardi, who pushes boundaries instead of following them, shows up, they don't know how to grade it. They either ignore it, misunderstand it, or label it as unworthy of a nomination. But this kind of bias isn't unique to Cardi. The Grammys have a long history of overlooking artists who define their eras. Just look at The Weeknd. He had one of the biggest albums in the world with After Hours, and the Grammys completely snubbed him. Not one nomination. That led him to publicly boycott the awards, calling them corrupt and broken. And he wasn't wrong, because when you look at who does get nominated, it's usually artists who fit neatly into what the Academy feels comfortable with. Even Tyler, the Creator, called them out a few years ago for labeling his innovative genre-bending work as rap, when it clearly wasn't just rap. The Grammys like to box artists in, especially black artists. If you don't fit their mold, they'll either mislabel you or ignore you entirely. And Cardi, with his wild sound and rebellious brand, might be the kind of artist they'd rather pretend doesn't exist. But there's also another layer to this, because sometimes it's not about bias, it's about perception. And this is where iammusic itself comes into the conversation. Let's be honest, iammusic had insane hype. Fans were waiting for years, like Cardi was building up to something massive. But when it finally dropped, the reception was split. Some fans thought it was genius, others felt it didn't live up to the expectation that had built up around it. There were discussions online saying the album, while full of energy and personality, didn't hit the same cultural moment that Whole Lotta Red did. To the Recording Academy, that kind of mixed reaction can be the difference between a nomination and a snub. They want consensus. Albums that critics, fans, and industry people all agree on. And Cardi's music is the opposite of that. His albums are polarizing by design. They grow on people over time, but the Grammys aren't patient enough to wait for that evolution. They judge based on surface-level first impressions. So between outdated voters, Cardi's refusal to play the industry game, and an album that didn't fit their definition of refined, you start to see how all these factors created the perfect storm for him to get ignored. The Grammys used to mean something, a symbol of prestige, proof that your art mattered. Now, it's more like a popularity contest mixed with political networking. The artists who make the most noise online, who have the right label connections, or who campaign the hardest get recognized. The ones who stay mysterious and outside the system get ignored. Playboi Carti doesn't play the game, and that's exactly why he'll never win by their rules. But in a weird way, that's also what makes him powerful. He doesn't need the Grammys need him. They need artists like Cardi to stay relevant to younger audiences. Because let's be real, most of their audience doesn't even watch the Grammys anymore unless there's controversy. And maybe that's the irony here. The Grammys blacklisting Cardi doesn't hurt Cardi at all. It just exposes how far behind they are. The Recording Academy is still grading music like it's the 1990s, while the culture has moved into something new, something chaotic, unpredictable, and loud. You can call it rage, trap, punk rap, whatever label you want, but it's real. It's what the new generation connects to. And if the Grammys can't understand that, they'll keep alienating the very artists shaping the future of music. So maybe Cardi didn't get snubbed. Maybe he got rejected for being too ahead of his time. Maybe the Grammys looked at him and saw something they couldn't define, couldn't categorize, couldn't control. And rather than admit that they're out of touch, they just acted like he didn't exist. That's what being blacklisted looks like. Not a conspiracy theory, but a quiet exclusion. No votes, no mentions, just silence. And the truth is, it's happened before, and it'll happen again. Until the Grammys stop rewarding familiarity and start rewarding innovation, artists like Cardi, Uzi, Yeet, or even experimental pop stars will always get overlooked. Because the Grammys don't reward what's new, they reward what's safe. So whether you think Cardi was actually blacklisted or just misunderstood, one thing's clear. The Recording Academy doesn't understand the culture anymore. They're grading the past while the future is performing right in front of them. And honestly, Cardi being ignored by the Grammys might be the most Playboi Carti thing ever. Because he's never needed their validation. The culture already crowned him.